Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm sure a lot of you will have been in quite a lot of talks over the last day and a half or so, so we're really grateful for those of you that have been able to join us. And for those of you who haven't been in any talks so far, thanks for making this your first. Good choice, I think. You will hopefully all know that you are here for a Data Talks event. We are having a number of sessions over the next day and a half still, so if you haven't signed up for any more, make sure you do. My name's Tom Aldworth and I'm an intelligence manager at Essex County Council in our data and analytics team. There's quite a number of facets to my role, but the most part for today's session is that I take a bit of a lead on our partnership activity. And I work closely with colleagues from across the public and third sectors in Essex, trying to provide appropriate support to partner organisations. And having worked with quite a lot of around Essex now, it's become clear that there are a handful when it comes to building our data culture and working with data effectively. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So many organisations grapple with how to explore opportunities presented by data analytics. Capacity and resource in particular can be real barriers in delivering against organisational ambitions for data and can prove to be a real challenge for those of us trying to build our capabilities and create impact from our data. This session is a discussion about some of the challenges that organisations with limited resource some of the challenges that organisations with limited resource can tackle. Stumbling over my words a little bit. There's a lot of people in the room, but we're going to talk about how we can tackle these challenges. There we go, got them out. So we're going to do this a little bit differently to some of the other sessions. We're going to have a number of different people talking, which is good because I can't speak today. So we've got joining us today, we've got Carly Jones from Braintree Council, we've got Sarah Bennett from Brentwood and Rochford District Council, and we've got Lisa Carpenter, who is a data science instructor at Digital Futures and a volunteer scientist with DataKind UK. All three have some fantastic experience in building capability, capacity and skills around data in organisations with limited resources. And I'm really excited that they've all agreed to join us today and share their experiences. I'm going to stop sharing screen and we're going to take slides down and we're going to just have a bit of a chat. So firstly, we're going to just hand over to Carly. Would you like to introduce yourself for everyone and kind of let everyone know a little bit about yourself and what you're up to in Braintree?
Yes, of course. Hello, everyone. My name's Carly and I lead the research and development team at Braintree District Council. So the research and development team sits within the Housing and Community Service. So this is a fairly large service, and to put this into a bit of context, it includes housing assessment, housing options, health and wellbeing, communities, including community transport and community safety, and venues, leisure, heritage and culture. So the purpose of the research and development team is to support these services with kind of any queries they may have. So it could be around monthly reports, data and research, performance monitoring, performance management. We produce monthly infographics. We also take the lead to develop the healthy housing strategy and the homelessness and rough sleeping strategy. So within the research and development team, there's myself and there's 10 officers. But the team is really diverse in our roles. So within R&D, we have empty homes and the private rented sector, enabling officer, housing strategy officer, admin and business support, and the research and performance officers and kind of fairly newly recruited data analyst apprentices. So that kind of gives you an overview of where I'm coming from today.
Awesome, thank you, Carly. Sarah, I think you are here, but we can't get your camera working. But would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I hope you've got a nice photo of me that will do, and my camera might pop up at some point. But yeah, thanks for having me join. I am Sarah Bennett, Director for Customer and Data Insight at Brentwood Borough Council and Rochford District Council. I've been in post since November 2022. It's a new position, so that gives you a bit of an idea of when data insight sort of became a priority for us. We are two local authorities working together in partnership. We don't share a boundary, so it's no merge, it's just a strategic partnership. But ultimately what we're working towards is, where suitable, a single officer team serving both councils. So that creates a challenge in itself, in terms of we're looking at two organisations' data rather than just a single organisation. My other oversights, as well as data, are customer, IT and digital. So there's quite a nice cohesion there in terms of the services that I oversee.
Thanks, Sarah. And Lisa.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for having me. So I'm Lisa. I am not working in the same sector as most people. So there's two sides to what I do. First of all, I am a data science instructor at a startup. So that's all about teaching people data skills to get them more comfortable and more data literate. The other thing I do is I am a volunteer at an organisation called DataKind UK. And DataKind UK is all about making data science, data analytics resources available to those working in any form of non-profit.
Excellent. Right, we're going to jump into a bunch of questions and have a bit of a discussion. There will hopefully be time for Q&A at the end. So if anyone does have any questions that they'd like to put to the panel as we go along, please feel free to use the Q&A function in the call. If you see a question that you particularly like, then do reactions to it, thumbs up and things, and hearts and all that sort of stuff, so that we know which ones to focus on if we are limited on time. But we'll get straight into it. So this session, as we said, is all about how we get started on building a data culture, particularly when resources and capacity limitations are some of our biggest hurdles. And I'd like to start by hearing from both Carly and Sarah about some of the challenges that you have each faced in your organisations and some of the successes that you've had so far. So we'll go to Carly first.
Okay, so the challenges we faced was probably around capacity and skill sets. So 18 months ago, we had 0.5 of a research and performance officer's role in place. And we worked really hard to build a business case to increase our capacity of staff. So we employed another full-time research and performance officer. And we also, as I mentioned before, have two data analysts in place currently. So once we got our capacity up, which is kind of half the battle, as you can imagine, kind of workflow increased. This meant that we had to make sure that we had the broad skill sets needed to deliver the work that we were doing, but we also wanted to do. And I think this was kind of a really critical part. So we needed to be able to continue with monthly reports, but we also wanted to start cleansing, interpreting and validating data. We wanted to produce some visualizations, wanted to work better to use data to make evidence-led decisions, identify trends, improve our forecasting across the whole service. So around 6 months ago, we were focused on mapping out some of our data. So that's where we had the idea to work with ECC, and I reached out to see if that was going to be a viable option. So ECC very kindly set us up with two data analysts within their team, and they have mentored and budded up with our research and performance officers from Braintree. So it's been great, because we went out to the team went out and spent a day in Essex, and they got to know them, and in turn Essex have supported the officers to develop their skills. So the impact of this has been far-reaching, and it's definitely been a success. So we are now undertaking and delivering work that we wanted to. So this mapping exercise that I mentioned, we now have a series of maps which overlay data which we didn't have 6 months ago. So this has made the team really excited for new challenges. It's also supported us to be more efficient. So, for example, probably similar to many people in the session today, we've been asked to do a lot more work around predictions and forecastings, especially when it comes to homelessness. So one of the first things we did when we had this request was to reach out to Essex again to see what work they're undertaking in this area and how that can be used in BDC, because we don't want to kind of start from scratch when we know there's good practice out there already. So yeah, I think kind of sharing knowledge has meant that we're a much more efficient and kind of skilled team.
I think that's obviously amazing to hear about the kind of strides that have been taken forward. And I think one of the most important things about what you said, for me at least, is the scaling up of the team over that time. And yeah, we aren't talking about kind of earth-shattering investment here in terms of like a whole swathes of new people joining the team, but even kind of introducing the new position has bolstered things to such an extent that you are able to make those efficiencies. And I think that's so important for our senior leaders to hear when we're in organisations with limited capacity, when people can hear about the examples of where you can really make that difference. I think it will make decisions a lot easier for them around how they choose to invest in analytics going forward.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you.
Sarah, same question to you. I'd like to hear about some of the challenges and successes that you faced in Brentwood and Rochford so far.
Yeah, we've approached it. We're trying to approach it sort of more from an organisation-wide perspective in terms of how we use data across the organisation. So as I sort of said in the introduction, November 22 really was the catalyst for us in terms of more formally setting it as a priority for both organisations. Previously, in terms of sort of to give you an idea of landscape, really all we had for both councils was that traditional kind of corporate performance type function, rather than specifically data analytics, and any specific data work was being undertaken in isolation within service areas. So bar performance officers, we didn't have the technology, skills, capacity within the partnership to support data insight as a centralised function. And we didn't really have the steer on what we wanted that priority to look like at that time. Some technical discovery work had been undertaken by digital teams, for example, but it never really progressed with any momentum in terms of what we even wanted an architecture to look like. So we also had a sort of a cultural challenge in terms of what did the organisation want or understand of what we wanted to do with data and analytics. And really we started to understand quite early that the focus there was on data as an output. People love a smart dashboard, but don't really understand the systems, processes, integrations that have to sit behind that to make all of that work, you know, to get into the engineering and analytics stage. As Kylie's touched on, your data sources are a real priority. So data collection and reporting is, if I'm honest, inconsistent. We've got a mix of some sort of database connected reports, but a lot of manual collection going on, lots of Excel, nothing wrong with Excel, but lots and lots of Excel. And as I said, that's all, a lot of work is being undertaken in isolation. Housing is a great example, not dissimilar to what Kylie said, who've done some brilliant things with the data. They're data rich and they've done some great stuff about targeted support, how they use their assets well, that sort of thing. But there'd been no plan for how to expand that good practice or share that insight wider with the organisation. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an understanding in terms of the landscape we were in sort of a year ago and probably still are in, if we're really honest. So not dissimilar to Kylie, approach partners, Tom being one of them. And I think this session might have been inspired by me because I probably literally said, Tom, where should we start? We had no budget, we had no dedicated resource, very limited understanding really on what we wanted data to achieve for us. The answer really, having spoken to lots and lots and lots of contacts at that point, was there is no right or wrong way to go about this. That's really going to depend on your organisation, your priorities, and what you want those outcomes to look like. So I don't know if that's sort of a reassuring piece of advice, or if that makes it even more of a challenge. But what there is great, good practice out there and great experience that we can tap into, and ECTA are a shining example of that. So we communicated a simple vision. What did we want our objectives to be as a data team? I use the term team loosely. How do we define our responsibilities, communicate our requirements for success? And really we've used that as a starter for 10 to kind of build some momentum. And we've been creative with existing resource, creative being the word, but we have managed to identify a part-time engineer and an analyst, and that's really been our catalyst to get things going. That engineer has designed and implemented a general purpose data warehouse, which has provided us with a simple data source. We've taken the corporate decision to use Power BI as our platform of choice for reporting and visualization. And we've worked with enthusiastic stakeholders who we sort of trust to work well with us and use the insight in a valuable way, to create some proof of concept. We want to create some envy. We want people to be impressed by it. It's the dashboard that people want to see. We want people to be impressed by that. And really, that's the way that we're trying to sort of gain buy-in. And finally, just one thing that has been a real success for us and that I would sort of share as a bit of a tip in terms of getting things off the ground is that we've applied our existing project management methodology to how we approve and prioritise work. It's really easy once you start promoting what data, insight and analytics can do for it to really run away, and you have a very, very small team doing itty-bitty work that's not really providing any value. We needed to find a way to control that. So we've used an existing methodology that the organisation's familiar with, so that we can make sure that the work that our very limited team are doing is really going to provide value. So that's kind of where we are to date.
No, I mean, that's amazing to hear. And I think there's certain things that you've said feel like they will really ring true for a lot of people. I know they do for me with ECC. I mean, you talk about the inconsistencies in the data, and I think that's something that we have as well. It's like there are certain pockets where things are as we would want them to be, and there are other places across the organisation where our data doesn't quite do what we want it to yet. And I think that's such a common journey for people. And I guess for me, it's so helpful to hear the way in which you guys are tackling things and kind of choosing how to prioritize your work and making sure that the work that you're having, the work that you're doing creates an impact. And again, some of the things you mentioned about the way you're tackling problems feels very familiar to some of the things we've done. And I can definitely kind of echo your suggestion of sort of choosing who to target and creating that envy. It's something that we've really tried to do ourselves. Is let's find someone who is a vocal supporter. Let's find someone who we can really get on side to champion our cause, and let's get them to influence the people around them. And I think it works really well. Lisa, so you mentioned in your intro that you volunteer with DataKind UK, and I know that you've worked with a bunch of kind of small third sector organisations with very little analytical capacity at times. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the common challenges that you've observed with such organisations?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting hearing everything Carly and Sarah said, because even in my startup that is full of very technical people, we have some very similar challenges. So it seems like the challenges really are consistent across all organisations. We find that there's 3 broad areas that organisations are typically struggling with, that they need some help with. The first one is always, who are the people we're working with? Who are our clients, customers, whatever term you use, knowing who they are in the sense of their demographics, what their demographic background looks like and things like that, and where are they as well. So first of all, really understanding the customer base, where they are, what they look like in terms of their demographics. The next challenge is really understanding how they're interacting, what services are they using, just really getting to grips with that. And the final one is that future looking side as well. So what might they want in the future? So that's the more predictive analytical side of working with data. But yeah, broadly, all of the problems can kind of fit into that space.
And when you are doing that sort of work around the predictive side of things in particular, working with, I guess it's so dependent on what data we have access to and how that data is structured. And obviously the infrastructure around that data has a massive part to play in the types of work we can do. And I know that DataKind have done some really kind of outstanding work with really small organizations. And I'm curious as to how you managed to overcome some of those kind of, I guess, infrastructural challenges. I'm assuming here that there are organizations who have very limited infrastructure and kind of the data will be not perfect, let's say. And I guess how do you manage to overcome those challenges?
Oh, that's such an amazing question. And actually, some of the things Carly and Sarah said were amazing on this. We have a data maturity framework, and it looks at how an organization thinks about data, how they culturally think about data, and then how they handle data. And while predictive modeling is really fun and exciting and can get people really, really on board, actually, if you don't have the infrastructure and the right data, it's probably going to provide not much value. It might give you a one-shot look at something fairly interesting, but it's not going to have that long-lasting impact. So until organizations are at the right level of maturity, they should actually focus on all of the incredible things that Carly and Sarah were talking about in terms of getting the stakeholders on board, in terms of having the warehousing set up, the reporting set up, and all of that stuff. So as exciting as predictive modeling is, until you've got everything else in place, it's probably not going to give you any value. particularly. Can't believe I said that as a data scientist. I'm going to be kicked out of data science world.
I think it's so important though that people are honest here, right? I think a lot of people will have experienced working with sometimes consultants. I don't like to use the C word, but we've all experienced working with people who can tell us that anything is possible and we can do absolutely anything with our data. And I think that sometimes it's really important to hear the message that it's not about running before you can walk. It is about building up a good base to start from and work out how do we get to that point in the future. I think when we try and launch straight into something that's incredibly ambitious, it can really hinder our long-term kind of maturity and literacy, and it can hurt the relationship we have with our stakeholders. If we overpromise and can't deliver something because of our data infrastructure, the thing that people come back to is, oh well, maybe data analytics, maybe data science isn't actually that helpful to me, and that's not the message we want people to take. Yeah, I think it's really fascinating the work that you guys do in DataKind, and obviously you told us a little bit about some of the common challenges, and you told us a little bit about some of the solutions when it comes to the kind of the predictive side of things. But can you share any strategies that you have with DataKind for how to overcome some of the problems more kind of specifically?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. And again, I'm going to keep referring back to what Carly and Sarah said. I think it's always that reflective moment when you really look at what you're going to do and you just take that time to really think through the strategy, the objectives. And before we get together and do any of our projects, we really look at what are we actually trying to achieve. That always really helps, and breaking things down into smaller components and really thinking about the impact and asking yourself why you're doing something. I know it sounds very basic and it's not some kind of like magic technology solution, but the technology side of things is actually the easier bit. Working out what you want to do and why, that's always the more challenging part. But once you've got that solved, the how tends to be quite easy.
Nice, thank you. Sarah, so I know that Brentwood and Rochford have quite lofty ambitions when it comes to data and analysis, and I'm curious to know what sort of support you think might be most beneficial for your organisations in delivering on those goals.
Yeah, I think if you'd asked me this question a year ago, I'd have probably said the obvious, which would have been around skills and capability. And I'm not to say that that's not still important and that's not something that as a really small team would need to tap into. But I think it's some of the other stuff that can be a distraction for a very small team, but that's really important in terms of our foundation. So actually some of the data maturity stuff, Lisa, that you've been talking about, that's really daunting for a small organisation with very limited resource, but it's probably a really important exercise that we should all be doing. So support around that sort of stuff. Buddying and mentoring for analysts. We have one analyst, for example, that can be a really lonely world. So I think, you know, there's something to say there about sort of larger communities of practice are great, but something one-on-one in terms of support and buddying and mentoring for analysts within small organisations would be really appreciated. Strategy development, we've toed and froed in terms of what our data strategy should look like. It's previously been part of our digital strategy. There's lots of experience out there that I'm sure we could tap into, you know, without having to start from scratch. So some things around that, same as like knowledge and resource hubs, you know, we'd like to not have to start from scratch if resources exist, JDs. We've talked about a data dictionary, things like that. You know, I'm sure all that exists somewhere that we could tap into. So that's really the support I think that we're looking for now is how do we strengthen our position with some of the stuff that's not directly linked to the sort of skills and capability and the actually delivering the data output.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting that I can't remember the exact words you used to phrase it, but it's that stuff that is sort of like the noise outside of projects that's so important around laying those foundations. But there's kind of how do you deliver your strategy? How do you upskill? How do you do all of this work that we all need to be doing to get to where we want to get to that isn't actually delivering the analysis? And it's so hard to find the time and capacity to do that. So I think, yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense that that's where support might be needed, and it's also hopefully we'll be able to offer some, and we'll come on to offer support soon. But I think you also mentioned, Sarah, specifically around that need for buddying and mentoring, and that actually leads us on very nicely, almost like we planned it, to Carly. I had a question for you, because you mentioned early on that we did some work collaboratively for some analysts within ECC to work with analysts from Braintree Council, and did some kind of buddying and mentoring work. So I wondered if you could share a little bit more about how that worked for the people in your team and how it's impacted upon their development.
Yeah, of course. So I think working with the external analysts has been brilliant for the staff. So I've seen it. I've seen kind of their confidence grow, but also from speaking to them as well, they kind of fully agree that they do have more confidence in the work that they're undertaking. So, for example, as I mentioned, like kind of our original issue was the fact that we didn't have anyone who could produce these maps and visualizations that we wanted to. The officers have now feel fully confident to be able to take on this challenge, and they've also produced probably another, I don't know, 7, 8 different maps overlaying data, which they wouldn't have been able to do before. So although we don't claim to be coders within the team, we don't write coding scripts from scratch. The fact that ECC did, and they helped us and kind of taught the team how to do that, it means that they are really confident in adapting and implementing what Essex have provided us for what we need. The I'd say kind of formal, like kind of informal, like buddying mentor situation that we have going on is really useful, because when anyone gets stuck with something that they're working on, they have officers that they can just drop a message to. So I know that there's several team chats set up with different officers in our team, with different officers in Essex. So that's kind of like a lovely way that they don't feel that they're bothering anyone from Essex, but they can kind of just check in and make sure that they're on the right path. As both you, Tom, and Sarah have mentioned, small teams really benefit from networking. So it's really important that we don't work in silo, and small teams can build a network of people in similar roles. So when we do get a challenge, we know that we don't need to just start from scratch again, because we know that somebody else has done it and they've probably done it to a really high standard. So we can just work with them to implement that in our area. And I think, I mean, there's lots, but I think kind of finally, there's also like the self-development. So upskilling and growing knowledge in this area without having to go on to a course or, you know, an apprenticeship or anything. There's, you know, there is kind of the knowledge in the work that you're actually delivering right now, I think is really useful. Yeah,
I mean, it's been a real pleasure to work with people in your team and kind of hear about that development that people have been able to go on. And I know that the guys from ECC have really enjoyed working collaboratively, and I think it's something that we all kind of benefit from ultimately. And I don't know, I think that as you say, it could be quite lonely being in a very small team when you are sort of isolated. Sarah, you mentioned only having one analyst, and that's a really challenging place to be in when you're looking to do your own, kind of drive your own development. So the more we can bring people together and kind of create surrogate teams, I think the better across the public sector in Essex and the third sector. I think the more we can support each other and kind of be there, the better. I think, Lisa, last question for you before we go to Q&A from the chat. Obviously, DataKind do some fantastic work with charities in particular, and I thought it might be helpful just for you to maybe quickly shout out, how can people work with DataKind if they have data science problems in the future?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So we do 2 main activities to help any non-profit organisation. The first is what we call our data dive projects. These are where we'll work with you on a really specific problem. So it might be things like, who are my clients, customers, who are my people, anything like that. And you get assigned a team of ambassadors. They'll work with you to prepare the data, prepare the questions, and then we all get together for a really fun weekend where we normally get around 20 to 25 data scientists from industry who are volunteers to come along, look at the data, and hopefully answer those questions. So that's always a really good, fun, high energy weekend to really work on the data and try to solve some challenges. The other thing we do is the longer data core projects. And this is where we'll get some volunteer data scientists in to kind of consult with you, work on a problem, and hopefully come up with some solutions. So they are the kind of longer term projects that DataKind might work on. So if anyone is interested to see if DataKind is the right tool for you or right team to work with, I'll pop the link into chat. We have a really great tool for seeing if we are kind of the right partner on some of those projects.
Thanks, Lisa. And if anyone does think that DataKind would be a good thing to work with, take a copy of that link and pop it into your browser now, because at the end of the meeting, I believe the chat, we'll all lose access to the chat once the session's over. So if you want it, keep hold of it, save it somewhere. I've gone over to the Q&A section and I can see only one question in there because a lot of them seem to have gone into the chat as well. So we'll start with the Q&A section and then we'll flip over to the chat. But Emily has asked, well, Emily has said she's very interested to hear how evidence-based decisions are being made at the councils with such small analytical and research capacity. So Sarah and or Carly, if one of you would like to, or both would like to answer that one, over to you.
I'm happy to talk generally, and then Carly will probably be able to give you some nice specific examples because she's done some really detailed work. I think generally, Emily, in response to that question, it's about being realistic on what a small team can do, and we're not going to turn our entire councils into evidence-based decision makers in every service area overnight. So I think that's where we come back to prioritising what are the organisation's priorities in terms of those really big key decisions and the evidence that's needed, or evidence-based for strategy, or what are those, how can we use our data insight team to be the most valuable team that they can be. This is a continual journey that will continue for a very long time for us. We know we're not going to solve it overnight, and we know there's no destination, you know, it will continue to evolve. But for us, it's been about getting something off the ground. Anything we're doing is better than what we weren't doing previously. And bit by bit, the more and more we work, the more data we get in that data warehouse, that information will be there for us when we need it. So yeah, I think it's about starting small and incremental, but I know Carly will have some great examples because they've done some brilliant work at Braintree. So I'll pass over to Carly.
Yeah, it is a really tricky one, and sometimes, I mean, can you have too much data? I guess you can, can't you? But we're quite specific. So we have our, for example, in our team at the moment, our healthy housing strategy and our homelessness and our sleeping strategy, and that will be the data that we're working on to make our kind of priorities and objectives in that area. So everything we do, we try to make sure we've got national, regional, because we can do some benchmarking, and our local data. Our local data is kind of generally what's in-house at the moment. We do work kind of with partnerships that we may fund, so we get information from the food bank and citizens advice, and that's where we came back and kind of to my original of mapping that out. How can we build some good and make some evidence-led decisions on the basis of all this data that's being captured slightly different on slightly different spreadsheets that come in at different times of the month. And sometimes we just need to kind of start back with our baseline of this is what we've got and this is what we can do. And once we've started with that and showcase it, I feel like we do a lot of showcasing and sharing within our service. We do our monthly infographics for every single area. And then once people see it, you kind of get more buy-in, so we get more data and better quality. And I think kind of that's the journey that we're on at the moment.
Nice. Thank you, Carly. I see a question in the chat from Amanda about skills that people are looking for data and analytics apprenticeship roles. And I also see some really good answers to that in the chat already. So I will just add to that. I think that for sorts of apprenticeship roles, there's obviously we're not expecting kind of the earth from people who are coming in at those sort of entry level positions, but I think having a good understanding of maths, having a good understanding of statistics is really helpful. I know that when we are talking about more kind of long-term positions, junior analyst and above, for us, we're looking for people who have kind of the soft skills as well. And I know that when we talk about the skills of a modern analyst, we talk a lot about how the perception of an analyst might be someone who kind of sits in the dark recesses of a dingy building somewhere and just stares at a computer screen. But actually, there's an awful lot more to being an analyst these days, I think. And we do things like this, and we talk to people, we talk about our work in a way that perhaps people wouldn't expect us to be able to. So having those soft skills is really important. But when we're talking about real entry level positions in particular, having a good level of understanding around kind of statistical techniques and things is a really important skill set for us. I would recommend looking into places like Data Camp to build skills. We use that to help upskill everyone in the team. Everyone has access to a Data Camp account in our team, and it helps with self-directed learning. So hopefully that's helpful. There was a question that I saw that I thought was really interesting from Andrew Page, and Andrew asked, was there much pushback from audiences? And again, I think this is probably for Sarah and Carly again. I think, I suppose with the challenges that you are facing in your organisations and with the steps that you're making, have you had much pushback on some of the journey so far, and how have you managed to kind of circumvent some of that? And if we're not allowed to talk about it because it's sensitive, then we'll just avoid the question. But is there anything that springs to mind for either of you?
I don't know if we have, to be honest, because I think everything is about making evidence-led decisions now. And if you're going to be making decisions on saving money or growing your team or which direction you're going to go in, you have to have that evidence base behind you. So I think we've been fully supported with everything that we're implementing, and there's kind of a, we're trying to do more than, just business as usual work. When we come across something, we're making sure that it is kind of shared and how we can use it. Every time there's a new dashboard out, we're looking, can we implement that? So we're trying to really grow in this area. So at this moment, I would say we haven't. In terms of the local authority, in kind of management, members, they're really enjoying seeing how we're reporting back. So it's not everything's in just a monthly written report anymore. We're being much more visual. We're showing trends, which was something we probably did kind of more in, like I said, like a written report, whereas now we're really trying to adapt and grow what we're doing. And so far, it's been really well received.
I mean, that's amazing to hear. That's really good. I think we'll take one more question from the chat, because I can see quite a lot popping off in there, including people already linking up and becoming buddies and mentors for each other, which is pretty awesome to see. But there was one question fairly early on for Sarah, and it was from Stephen. And Stephen asked, he said, Brentwood and Rochford don't seem like natural bedfellows. Are there challenges when the challenges themselves are different in one area compared to another?
Yeah, that is an interesting question that sort of covers everything outside of data as well. There are lots of similarities across the authorities, but I think what's important is that we welcome and respect our similarities as much as our differences. There are naturally unique identities to each authority, and there are lots and lots and lots of similarities where the work we do can be aligned across both. I think what's important from us and where we're really leveraging value from the partnership is that we're trying to do things once rather than twice and apply that to both councils. And this is a great example of that, really. We've got very limited skill, very limited resource. If we were doing it alone, we'd have even less. So actually what we're doing for both councils is more than we could have done alone. So that's really where the value comes. But ultimately there will be unique challenges for each authority, and we will respect those as those priorities come forward and to what's required sort of on a project by project basis. But there's lots of similarities too, and that's brilliant, and that will save a lot of time than if we were doing things separately. So really great question. Thank you, Stephen.
Right, excellent. I'm going to share screen again, because we've obviously heard from everyone about support needs and kind of what's out there. And I guess what we'd like to do as ECDA, the Essex Centre for Data Analytics, is sort of formalise our offer a little bit more. So we've been working quite a lot with partners around Essex for quite a long time now. We've been doing a lot of work as a core function in ECDA between Essex County Council, Essex Police and University of Essex. But we've also worked with others. Some of you will have heard Lucy Clayton from Essex Fire and Rescue yesterday talking about work that we did collaboratively a couple of years ago. And we have worked with a bunch of different organisations around the county, and we want to sort of do more of that. Over the course of the past year in particular, I've been working a lot with colleagues from district councils and charities, and it's how I know Sarah and Carly. And I think what we've observed is that the requests for support and the needs that we see in organisations with limited capacity are quite similar. And what we want to do as ECTA is launch a bit of a formalised offer, as I say, and I'm going to talk through it a little bit now. So it's broadly chunked up into 3 themes, which is why you can see 3 grey boxes. But the first is about demonstrating the case for change. So we've heard people talking about the need to develop case studies and help demonstrate the power of good data usage and analytics. And as a result, we want to help partners to deliver good quality case studies. So to do this, ECTA is committing to providing a consultancy offer, developing a resource library to support the development of business cases and best practice. So as I say, we've spent a long time developing robust processes, standards, guides, templates, project life cycles, and lots more. And we want to make sure that all of these things are available to everyone via a shared library. So over the early part of 24/5, we're going to be repurposing the Data Talks SharePoint site to become a bit of a partnership library, including all of those resources that I've just mentioned. And we hope that by sharing these resources, we'll be able to facilitate partners to develop really excellent case studies and create real impact with their analytics. And alongside that, we want to share our analytical skills and expertise to deliver data sharing projects or advanced analytical skills in partner organisations. So we want to collaborate on projects or deliver on people's behalf. So as I said, you heard yesterday, some of you, from Lucy at the Fire and Rescue Service about the accidental dwelling fire project that we worked on collaboratively. We've done other projects with other organisations around the county, and we want to do more of that. We really want to demonstrate the value of analytics, and we are really keen to keep collaborating with everyone around the county. As we see good analytics and data science projects in any part of Essex as being a really powerful, positive tool in delivering meaningful change for residents. The second key part of the offer is around IAG and shared posts. So again, we've listened to colleagues across the county, and recruitment came up a lot as a challenge. People told us about needing to recruit data professionals with specific skill sets, but a lot of the time the people doing the recruitment kind of don't necessarily know what they need or haven't got those skills themselves and aren't sure how to identify them. So over the course of the past year, we've proofread some job descriptions and adverts, and we've been available to join interview panels where needed. And again, that's something else we want to formalise to our partners. We want to provide information, advice, guidance around recruitment and talent management. But as part of that, through the SharePoint site that I mentioned previously, we want to share things like job profiles, competency frameworks, interview questions and tests that we use, because again, we want to ensure that the analytics community in Essex continues to go from strength to strength, and we think that doing this is a great way of helping to make that happen. We also want to formalise our offer of shared resources and joint roles. We have a handful of examples of analysts being co-funded by partner agencies but embedded into core ECTA teams, either in ECC or with Essex Police. And this is proven to be really powerful in the development of analysts and of analytics for each organisation, but particularly for analysts, because as we spoke about in the Q&A part, it can be really lonely to be a single analyst in a team of one. And we want to help to create that kind of surrogate team. And where we've had people be able to be embedded directly into our service, but work specifically for another organisation who kind of, that they are their main customer, I suppose, it means that those analysts are able to gain access to all of the training opportunities, peer support, advice and guidance of a team of analysts and other data professionals around them. And lastly, it's all about analytical communities. So hopefully a lot of you will be aware of Be Part of the Equation networks that ECTA has been running for quite a number of years now. These are networks that include a number of different things, including show and share sessions, analytics community of practice, data leaders forum, data science methods group, data ethics committee. But over the next couple of months, we're going to be reviewing the way that Be Part of the Equation events run, and we're going to be seeking to revamp the format a little bit. We want to create a real community of data professionals in Essex, and we really believe that sharing skills, knowledge and problems will lead us to finding professional development and having a real impact in the communities that we work to support. So if you or the data professionals you work with aren't currently signed up to be part of the equation, please make sure you do. You can contact Hector on the hector@essex.gov.uk email address. And yeah, here's just a little slide, a little bit about Be Part of the Equation. We've had more than 30 organisations represented at events so far, over 180 analysts. We do all sorts of different things through the sessions, provide guidance, support. We share examples of work that we've been doing. And our next event will hopefully be taking place in May. So if you aren't part of the network, please become part of the network, because it's a really great group of people to learn from and work with. I want to say a massive thank you again to Lisa, Sarah and Carly for joining us. I've really enjoyed hearing from you all about the work that you're doing. I think it feels like we are in a really positive moment around data and analytics in the public third sectors, and it's really important that we all share our challenges and also our successes, because we all face the same problems, and I think it's so powerful for us to hear that we aren't the only one with the problem that we have. Other people have it too, and sometimes someone else has got a solution. So anyone in the chat, anyone who's managed to attend today who kind of feels like there's successes that they want to share or problems that they want to raise with other people, make sure you're reaching out to other organisations, because we can really help each other. And I think that this is how we create positive and lasting change through data and analytics. So yeah, thank you everyone.